Evil Saitama is coming to One Punch Man. This is a theory that's circulated around the One Punch Man community for years now, and people are so convinced that this theory will come to fruition that many don't think it's a question of if it'll happen, it's just when we'll see Evil Saitama get introduced into the story. Well, what if I told you guys that we've already seen the seeds planted for Evil Saitama to come into the story, and even crazier than that, we might be seeing him a lot sooner than you think. Today I'll be talking about the Evil Saitama theory, and by this point, it isn't a theory anymore. But before that, if you guys enjoy One Punch Man related content like this, please make sure to subscribe because you won't have any shortage of it here. I post regularly every week, and it's almost always One Punch Man content, so you'll never have a shortage of it here. But enough of that, let's get right into the video. So, I know I made some big claims at the beginning, saying that Evil Saitama has already been foreshadowed in the story, but it's the truth, or at least my truth, and let me go into more detail about what I mean. So before I get into what I think will be the catalyst that makes all of this happen, I wanted to quickly talk about Saitama as a character himself, because it will be very important later. So as we all know, Saitama has immeasurable strength. He's so strong that literally nothing in the entire world and seemingly the entire universe can possibly lay a scratch on him. And this has caused Saitama to really lose himself, to really lose all emotions that make someone human. And we see him talk about this as early as the first episode of the anime, when he talks about becoming so strong that he doesn't feel fear, happiness, sadness anymore. He just feels empty. It's kind of reflective of the whole "it's lonely at the top" idea, where he's just so far ahead and above everybody else in terms of power that it's hard for him to relate to anybody and feel human. Now, this all started to change when he first met Genos, because although he kind of thought of him as an annoyance at the beginning, throughout the story we see that Genos really grows on Saitama and he becomes something of like a little brother to him, or at the very least a best friend. So in chapter 167, when we see Genos get killed right in front of Saitama, this is all taken away from him. Genos was the only thing keeping Saitama grounded, keeping him feeling like he was still a human inside. And once he lost him, we saw that he became completely unhinged and totally disregarded humanity and the planet Earth by throwing a serious punch at Garo at the same time as Garo throwing his own serious punch. And he probably knew well that these two punches colliding would mean certain destruction for the Earth, and he just didn't care. We even see him casually mention destroying the Earth because his house was destroyed just before we saw Saitama fight Garo. I don't think this was exaggeration. I don't think this was a joke. I think Saitama genuinely felt like destroying the planet Earth at that moment. And it might sound hard to believe, but we gotta remember that we're thinking of this through our own personal view, our own emotions that we would feel if something like that were to happen, which is something that Saitama lacks. We see in chapter 168, once Saitama finally defeats Garo and they start to have their heart-to-heart conversation, when Garo talks about wanting to save Terrio, and Saitama responds with, "You wanted to save him, you weren't just clinging to him for support." This is when we realize that this is what Genos meant to Saitama. It's not Genos clinging onto him and chasing after him. It's Saitama clinging onto Genos because he's the only thing in the world that made him feel human. And it was said perfectly in this chapter when he says, "There's no way a person with that kind of power can keep in their right mind." And remember that at this point, there are tons of people that have died, and Saitama hasn't even given that a thought at all throughout this entire fight. So it's really only about Genos here. So with so little keeping Saitama clinging onto his humanity, it wouldn't be a far-fetched thing to say that Saitama is carefully walking the line of being a hero or being a straight-up monster. But now because of time travel, Genos is back, everyone's back, and everything's okay. But what if that didn't happen? What if in the future a similar cataclysmic event happens that leads to the death of tons of people, including Genos? I'd find it hard to believe that One and Murata would slap time travel in there to fix everything again. That would just be bad writing, and we all know that One is not a bad writer. So now that I've kind of made you guys understand the fragility of Saitama's humanity and therefore his current status of, quote unquote, a good guy or a hero, this next part will make a lot more sense. So I definitely don't believe that Saitama himself will become evil. I don't think that's the direction the story is going to go. But what I do think is that another Saitama will be created, but this Saitama will lack that tether to humanity, that Genos in his life that'll keep him good and a hero. But how's that going to happen? How are we going to get a different Saitama? Well, you don't have to look any further than chapter 141 of the webcomic. And before I get into the rest of the video, of course I will be going into webcomic spoilers now. So if you haven't read the webcomic yet, I suggest you check out, read it, and then come back at some point to finish this video, because I will be talking about the most recent chapter of the webcomic. So in chapter 141 of the webcomic, we see Saitama and Genos visit Dr. Kuseno. They spend some time together, eat dinner, and towards the end of the night, Dr. Kuseno requests if he can have Saitama lay in this chamber where he can then record data from Saitama to kind of figure out how he's so powerful. Saitama agrees and falls asleep in the chamber as the data is being collected. But suddenly, the lab is attacked while Saitama is sleeping. 3 machine gods show up, trash the lab, and kill Dr. Kuseno. We then of course see Genos get enraged by this and go on to take care of those 3 machine gods. Even more of them show up, to which Saitama of course one-shots them all, and that's the end of that. What's really interesting about this though is that the pod that Saitama was in, or the machine that was collecting data, wasn't explicitly shown as being destroyed or unsalvageable. And we gotta remember that this is the organization we're talking about attacking Dr. Kuseno's lab. And many speculate that the organization is what's behind the Neo Heroes and the sudden rise of artificially enhanced monsters. And we see throughout the manga and the anime that the organization is in the business of collecting battle data. So we can assume that they know what to do with it. They know how to enhance things or create things that match that battle data that they've recovered. So what I think is going to happen here, once Genos and Saitama leave the lab, someone from the organization is going to sneak back over there, find the data that was collected from Saitama, take it back to the organization's facilities, and transfer that data into a cyborg or create a whole new being altogether, aka Evil Saitama. This Saitama will have all of Saitama's strength and abilities, and if he's a perfect clone of Saitama, he might retain Saitama's personality and outlook on life, but in a controlled environment where he doesn't have a Genos to hold on to or is kept in some kind of lab environment. It'd be very easy to see how this Saitama can be easily brainwashed to only destroy and not care about it in the process, because we have to remember that our Saitama, the good Saitama, doesn't really care much about anything either. It wouldn't take a lot of brainwashing for the organization to create their own perfect weapon. I don't think Saitama sitting in this chamber and having this data collected was just a throw-in or some kind of meaningless part to that chapter. I do really think it carries a lot of relevance to the story going forward, because one is very intentional with the things that he lays out in One Punch Man. He usually doesn't leave open-ended things like this. Although we don't know the full motivations of the organization to this point, one thing we do know for sure is that they're shady and they're all about collecting data and working behind the scenes. So it's quite possible that this whole time they've been working towards building their perfect weapon, their perfect indestructible being, which will culminate in Evil Saitama. And who knows, if this organization has ties with God, then this Evil Saitama could even be the avatar for God himself, much like how he tried to make Garo his avatar. And just imagine the immeasurable strength that this Saitama would have in that case. But of course, we know that our boy Saitama is never going to lose, but I do definitely think he will get pushed farther than he ever has been if this is the case, and I just can't wait to see it. But what do you guys think? Do you think I'm crazy? Do you think that there will be an Evil Saitama introduced into the story? Or do you think I was just digging too deep and this whole idea is completely ridiculous? Either opinion is valid, and I definitely want to know about it in the comments. Let's have a conversation here, guys. I think this is a very interesting topic, so I'm very curious to what your guys' ideas are about this. But if you enjoyed this video, if you gained anything out of it, please make sure to drop a like and please subscribe. I'll be back at you guys again tomorrow with another One Punch Man video. So until then, I'll see you guys later.